Okay, so in this section, I want to go over a couple of important things to know about OBS Studio, some really kind of helpful tips and stuff like that. So the first time you start it up, under Tools, you'll see the Auto Configuration Wizard. And also, if you're not streaming or not recording, you can also open up the Auto Configuration Wizard. And what this does is you can see it brings up, it says optimized for streaming, recording is secondary. It gives you those options. And auto configuration is pretty accurate. So I generally recommend running that the first time and letting OBS see what kind of system you've got. But I'm already done that, so I'm not gonna do it right now. You can also, with your scenes, you can duplicate them. And I've kind of touched on this before, but what I wanna do is I wanna right click on this. I wanna duplicate. It gives you a lot of options for it. Copy filters, things like that, rename, remove. You always have to have at least one scene, by the way. So we're just going to do this, and you see it brings up the default name, Blackmagic Device 2. If I want to give it a different name because I want to do something different with it, tell it no audio, just to play around with it. So Blackmagic Device. And you can also use the little up and down arrows to move it up or down. Now this doesn't really, with the scenes, doesn't really kind of mean much other than, kind of where it appears in the order. Let me go back to studio mode. But in the, in the BMD no audio scene, I can remove my laptop mic if I want to. And now in the no audio scene, I can tell it cut. You can see my microphone went away, but everything else kind of stays the same. So you can duplicate scenes, you can rename them. Same thing with sources I've kind of mentioned before. You can rename sources by right-clicking on it. And you can duplicate them from scene to scene using an add existing. And that is really, really powerful, really labor-saving device for that. Because if you're not careful, you will do what I've done and end up with, as it opens up, I'll give it a second. You can experiment and you can have bazillion scenes. So these are some stuff over the course of the 5 or 6 months that I've done where I've got, you can see some test scenes, bringing in Skype, music lyrics, cropping things, NDI laptop, so you can have all sorts of scenes. We're going to go back over here to our ALCTE virtual presentation collection of scenes. You can export them, if you have different computers, so you can set it up once, export the scenes to your computer hard drive, open them up in another one, import them. So again, very, very powerful. Profiles you can set up, for different users to give them access to those scenes. And again, it's just very powerful because if you notice, OBS by default doesn't really give you a save when I open this up. So you don't really save it. What you're actually doing in OBS Studio is you are setting up profiles and scene collections. So scene collections, so you got to think about it in an OBS world, which is more scene collections, collections of sources. So, and again, let me give you a little more information in detail about the sources. So let's say we've got down here on this one, well, we'll duplicate this scene again. And we'll call this one image. So I've got this here, I've got my, let me go ahead and cut to it. So I still got my mic, and now to this image scene, I'm going to kind of mute that picture right there. I'm going to come in here, I'm going to tell it, and again, you have so many different options that you can do. Let me go ahead and do image. Create new. Now, once you add an image into the OBS kind of world, into the program, it's going to be there. So I'm just going to tell it OK. And I'm going to browse. And it's going to click this random picture from where we're getting some lightboard training and learning all about DMX lightboards, which, highly recommend learning about OBS Studio. DMX, wow. That's a whole nother. So it brings in this picture. And when I click OK, you see it brings it in at full size. So one thing you'll have to do sometimes is you may need to come in here and resize a picture. You can see I can kind of squeeze it down and move it around. And by the way, you can do this, you can actually get your pictures down any size you need in there. I generally like to do this with there. So I can actually do kind of a picture-in-picture thing. So if you notice now that I've got this kind of scaled down and clicked on, it's upside down. So I would right-click on it, and you can see that it gives me the ability to transform it, and so I might want to flip it. I guess I should actually flip horizontal, shouldn't I? Let's do transform. There we go. Now it's, where it needs to be. And when I cut, it applies that transformation. So images, you can actually add image sources, you can have slideshows and set up hotkeys to go through each of them. Okay, so now that we've got our image displayed, let's say we wanted to capture a browser. OBS Studio works pretty well with most things except for Chrome, so let's try actually see what it looks like when we actually do a browser capture. So keep in mind that when you do a browser capture, this is the actual OBS browser. And you can see it starts out 800 by 600. So I'm just going to tell it, OK, and that's kind of the default. So I'm going to pull this over here and do cut. Now, if I wanted to actually go to a different web page, I would tell it Properties. I could probably do this first. And I'm just going to type in our Montevallo homepage and tell it OK. And there it is. And it updated and refreshed. Now again, like every other source in OBS Studio, I can rescale it if I need to. I can refresh it just like any other browser. So, it lets you do pretty well all those different sources. And I would really recommend kind of playing with the different sources to build a show that you want. OBS Studio will really let you do a lot of really cool things with that, to record, to capture, to stream out. You can even add text. So let's come in here and add text. And it brings up, and I'm just going to type, let's see, virtual conference. I cannot with my hanging. Gives you the ability, of course, to select font just like other programs, the size. So we'll do OK. Now I can scale that and kind of move it around wherever I need, kind of build that scene up. So again, remember, this is a scene that I'm building up that's not showing up yet. And so it won't happen until I click that. And just a quick thing about the ordering. So let's say that I pulled this down on top and I want my text to be down behind my browser. Kind of a fun little thing to do. Now if I click cut, it does that. So that's a little bit about layering and all that, because again, in the sources are actually layers, and the one that's on top will be the one that shows up most of the time. So you can have multiple texts. I can come in here and I can duplicate and edit, do all sorts of really cool stuff with my sources. And this is real important to remember that these sources are grouped by scenes. So once you kind of get that workflow in mind, it should help you out with that. Now another kind of cool thing to end on, I've kind of gone through all this stuff about OBS Studio, and you're probably thinking, wow, that looks, pretty straightforward and stuff. If your computer will handle it, you can actually do some cool stuff with it. Down here under View, this multi-scene window thing, where it brings up almost like a little touchscreen switcher. I can actually see, little previews until I click this with my mouse, of the scenes that I'm talking about. And you can see my preview and my program. So let me drag this down here a little bit. So there's my bar, so I can click cut, and it pops it up over there. Now this actually works better if you've got a dual monitor setup than my single monitor that I've got, although I can come up here and do full screen with this, so now I can take. But generally would not really recommend I would use the multi-view if you've got a second monitor or aren't running OBS Studio in full screen mode, like I'm doing right now. Generally, studio mode, to me, is one of the safer ways to do it, because I can kind of, with a big screen, I can kind of preview everything that I'm going to do. So that's really, an overview of OBS Studio. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you have questions, again, my email address is right here, cofieldj@montevallo.edu, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have about this. So thanks for tuning in, and please, again, let me know what you think and if you have questions.